You look down and you see nothing but your feet and then 250 miles below the earth. So the idea is that we might be able to produce much higher artificial tissues like cartilage to be used in patients back down on earth. I'll run, 5 miles easily on the treadmill, no sweat. When I land, I won't be able to run a mile.
Welcome to Project Swagger, the wellness podcast for ambitious hustlers who don't have time for shit that doesn't work. I'm Ravinat's son, athlete, executive, mom of two, and all the routines, strategies, and mindset shifts that I talk about here, I have pressure tested in my own life. Today, we are combining two of my biggest passions, building mental and physical strength and space. Space. Yeah, like moon, stars, sun. Yeah. This is a really special episode, y'all. It's a first for the Vox Media podcast network. I am going to be interviewing an astronaut who is currently at the International Space Station, Jessica Meir. This is someone who is breaking incredible boundaries. In October 2019, she was part of the first all-woman spacewalk. This is when you put on a spacesuit and leave the spacecraft. But in other ways, Jessica is like many women who listen to this show. She is ambitious, curious. She is a mother. She is an athlete. She is an expert in her field. Talk about a multi-hyphenate. She has so much to share with us, from how one deadlifts in space. Yes, she is getting her deadlifts in space, to the lessons she learned training for the physical and mental challenge of leaving the stratosphere. This is a conversation about just how far pure curiosity and grit can take you. It inspired me, and I know it will inspire you too.
Hi, Robin. How are you?
I love seeing you floating around. It brings so much joy to my day. Welcome, Jessica Meir, to Vox's first interview with someone recording in space. Let's set the scene. Where are you in the ISS right now?
Well, I'm very honored to be that person to fill that first box. I am right now in the Japanese experiment module. So I am on the International Space Station, 250 miles above the Earth, cruising around 17,500 miles per hour. I'm toward the front of the space station right now, and we can kind of do a tour through or go wherever you like.
Yeah. Well, okay. So tell me what you did today. Like, day in the life is, I imagine, a little bit different when you are on a mission in space. So what did you do today?
Yeah, every day is a little bit different, but we have a
Oh, this was what we expected. What happens? She orbits and we lose her, and then maybe we get her back in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, that was part of just living in space. We are using these series of communication satellites to talk. And so we had a handover from one satellite to the next. We had a brief gap and we had to reconnect. We're back. So this morning we start the day every day with a daily planning conference with the ground. So we talk to our ground team in Houston, but also centers in Moscow and then in Huntsville, Alabama, that run our experiments, also in Munich and in Japan. So all of the different international partner centers. And we kind of go over any big picture stuff. After that, I had to install some equipment for a new microscope it just arrived on the space station, and we were setting it all up. So I made a little song called "I'm Building a Microscope." So I was building a microscope this morning. We didn't quite finish it. We're going to finish it tomorrow. Then I had lunch, and then I got into the glove box, which is a life sciences glove box. So you stick your arms through these holes, and then you have gloves on. So it's a contained environment for doing things like biology experiments, or if you're working with chemicals, if you need to keep things sterile, or if you want to keep things out of our atmosphere, because of course everything floats here. So you can't use, harmful chemicals like you can when they stay contained in gravity. And this experiment, I think you actually find pretty interesting. It's actually with a cartilage. It's like a 3D printer for cartilage. And that's happening. So there are a lot of people on the ground that are trying to make artificial cartilage called neocartilage to use for transplants in patients. And one of the things that happens on Earth is you have differences in the way the cells will distribute. And in microgravity, without gravity up here, you actually have a more uniform cell distribution. And so you have a higher quality tissues. So the idea is that we might be able to produce much higher artificial tissues like cartilage to be used in patients back down on Earth. It might actually, we'll have to see if it's actually a good cost benefit ratio in the future, but we're kind of testing out technologies and and systems like that to see if there's a benefit to doing it in space. So this is a good example for athletes that need a joint replacement or some have some
For
difficulty with their
sure.
cartilage.
That's
A
so
lot of
cool.
really cool science we're doing like that.
And you yourself are a human science experiment while being up on the ISS. Let's talk about your training. I mean, the rigors, the physical and mental rigors that it takes to be an astronaut are not something I think the average person thinks about when we think about space travel. So can you describe that for us a little bit?
Sure. So when we get selected to be astronauts, we undergo about a 2-year period called astronaut candidate training. And that is kind of all the like basic training for astronauts. So you start doing things like flight training, flying jets, which was another dream of mine. So I was really excited about that. We start learning how to use the spacesuit. We start learning about the space station systems because, up here we can't call a plumber or an electrician. We have to fix the toilet, change the light bulb, and then do the experiment. And we also have Russian language training. Everybody up here has to be proficient in both Russian and English since we are the two main partners. NASA and Roscosmos are the two main partners. And I really love studying other languages, so that's great. And then, the physical training, of course, is a part of it as well. And that's having a good level of physical fitness is really important for everything that we do. When we come up here, exercise becomes a very, very important part of our routine. We exercise for 2.5 hours a day. That includes the setup and cleaning up and everything. But I'll lift weights for about an hour and I will do cardio for about 40 minutes. So either the treadmill or the cycloergometer, our stationary bike. And it's really, really interesting how quickly you recover. I would
Mm.
never lift heavy weights every day. I would take a day off. Maybe I do strength training, definitely not 7 days a week. Up here, I do it 7 days a week because you're offloaded the rest of the time.
Wow, that's so
So, yeah, I think
interesting. Yeah, the skeletal system is like, give it to me every day for an hour because, microgravity is kind of taking on some of that load.
absolutely, yeah, it gets a break through the rest of the day. And so it's really important. Otherwise, we would have very significant muscle atrophy and bone density loss if we didn't do this exercise.
Wow, that's so interesting. So let's talk about the spacewalks. So for the uninitiated, what is a spacewalk? And then describe, the physical challenges, the spacesuit, all that.
So spacewalks are when we put a spacesuit on and go outside the space station. And usually that is for some type of repair. Really, always it's either some kind of maintenance upgrade or a repair of something that has failed. And that the reason that is so taxing is because when we put on this big spacesuit, we weigh over 400 pounds in this suit. So even though everything's weightless up here, there's still a lot of mass. You have a lot of mass. And in order to keep us safe in the vacuum of space, that spacesuit has to be pressurized. So you're in this really, really bulky spacesuit that's under pressure. So every time you use your hands, not only do you lose a lot of dexterity because of all the layers of protection, you also are reacting against the pressure. So it's kind of like squeezing an
Mm.
exercise ball with everything that you do. So it's definitely the most physically taxing thing that we do and the most mental challenging as well. But I would also say the most rewarding because it's a totally different thing when you're looking out the window in on the space station and I would say I would compare it to when you're in a car and you drive up to the top of a mountain and you look out from the car and you say, oh, this is pretty, I'm on the top of a mountain. Or if you get out of the car and you walk over to the edge of the cliff and you look down and you hang over the cliff as if you're about to fall off. That's the difference of how it feels when you're outside looking at the earth in just your spacesuit, your own little mini self-contained spacecraft, and the thin visor of your helmet. So it's really it's an incredible feeling and one that I'll never forget. People describe it in a lot of different ways, but I think everything looks more vibrant. Just understanding what you're doing, of course it's us that are moving around the earth really quickly, but it looks as if the earth is spinning below you. You look down and you see nothing but your feet and then 250 miles below the earth. So it's pretty intense
Unreal.
feeling.
Talk about intense. Yes, I can only imagine. Thank you for that vivid description. So, how heavy is the spacesuit? And do I have it correct that that the one you wear was originally designed for men?
Yeah. So yeah, when we are in it, you're a little bit over 400 pounds or so. And these spacesuits that we're wearing now, things move very slowly in this industry. And that's because everything has to go very, very robust safety training and certification training to fly in space before we use it up here. And the way the program's developed at NASA, the spacesuits that we're using now were designed for the space shuttle program. So they were really designed before I was born. They were designed in the 70s And people back then that were doing spacewalks were all big men. And so when they were originally designing the spacesuit, they were supposed to have 5 different sizes to accommodate, a wider spectrum of sized people. But with budget cuts, we're a government agency. In the end, they could only make 3 sizes. So they looked at the current population back then and they chose the 3 largest sizes. So we're still stuck with these old spacesuits. When unfortunately, now that astronauts also look like me, as well as these really big, tall men, it's a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more challenging for us to work in the spacesuit because it just doesn't fit me as well. When I'm in the suit, I can move all around. It's not, if you really fill out the suit, it's more like an extension of your body. So you can imagine it's much easier to work in something when it fits you well. So it's an added struggle, but I think it's an interesting one. I think you'll find this interesting is that, I think for people like me, when you start learning how to use the spacesuit, we're ultimately successful, just like somebody who's, 6'4", but we have to be more creative and we have to use our minds more than just our muscle. And it's not even just muscle. It's, I think in the spacesuit, leverage is even more important than muscle. So I work out as much as I can because I can increase my muscle, but I can't really increase my leverage.
Yeah,
And
right,
so I
exactly.
think what happens is that smaller people, it's not just women, it's just smaller people in general. Women, of course, are generally smaller, so it affects more of us. But if you're smaller, you have to use your mind more to problem solve. And I'll watch in training in the pool underwater and I'll see, my 6'4" classmate do something and he just easily reaches over from this or he overpowers something. Whereas I have to actually solve this mental problem first of like, how am I going to get from there to there? But I have to be more creative. And I think in the end, it actually really gives us a very solid skill set, which sometimes maybe takes them or they don't actually develop because they're just used to powering it through. So I try to look at it as like, okay, it was a disadvantage probably at first, the learning curve was steeper, but in the end, maybe I'm a stronger spacewalker because of it.
I love this. And you were part of the first all-female spacewalk. So that's a pretty iconic. I love hearing about this, and you are so inspiring in the way that you look at the challenge, right? You say, like, this is a puzzle, and now I'm going to actually have greater aptitude because of the challenge that I had. Um, let's talk about your equipment, right? So you mentioned that you're strength training. I know that you do deadlifts and squats and cycling and running. Just describe for us, what that equipment looks and feels like.
Yeah, I can fly you over there a little bit too, so we
Awesome.
can look at it while we're talking about it. And while we do that, I'll add, for the new spacesuits, thankfully we are developing new spacesuits now, and we are developing them for a very large, very diverse population from, like 5th to 95th percentile. And we actually did the right thing where we started with a smaller suit because it's much easier to design something bigger than it is smaller. So they
Right, right.
started with a smaller suit and yeah. So for the future, spacesuits will fit everybody much better.
Love this.
So we're going to cruise through here. For our strength training, we have a device called the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, ARED. We love our acronyms at NASA. And to me, this is one of the coolest things that we have up here on the space station because it is a true engineering marvel. There is a guy who designed this thing, and that man had never been in space before. He had never actually experienced weightlessness, but somehow he was able to design this incredibly complex piece of equipment that moves in all planes. And let's see on Zoom if I can switch to my back camera. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Oh,
Okay, so
cool.
right now we are looking at ARED. So this black part on the ground is the foot plate. So that's
Mhm.
where we put our feet, and then you can see the bar over here. So this is a bar, like
Yep.
just like the normal bar that you would use in the gym. And right now it's velcroed down, but you just take these pieces of velcro off. This thing flips up, and it can be configured in a really a large number of different configurations to enable all kinds of different exercise. It uses these very large vacuum tubes because, of course, how do you lift weights in space when everything's weightless? And that generates the resistance. And you can see on the dial here, this thing goes all the way up to like 600 pounds. So you can
Wow.
really lift. You can throw around a lot of weight up here. Obviously, it feels a little bit different than lifting in a gym, but it's a much nicer feeling than like I don't really like Smith machines. Like this machines like that at gyms that you don't really feel the weight in the same way. It's
Mhm.
better than that. It's much better than that, and your body just ends up craving it up here. So basically, you put your feet here on the foot plate. You can flip this up. I can do my squats. I can do deadlifts. I can do Romanian deadlifts. I can do shoulder press. I can do uh, thrusters. I can do a swing and hold. I can do sit ups. So you really get an absolute full workout, everything that you need to do. And it's all right here.
That's so invigorating. And when you transition back to Earth, like, is there kind of a like what is that transition physically or mentally like?
It feels terrible. It feels
Oh no.
It's yeah, you feel really tired. So I when I know sometimes when I describe it, it's as if, you're if you see kids on the playground, you have a bully that's running around and, putting their head on hand on your head and pushing you down. Like you literally can feel gravity because,
Wow.
you're not used to it at all. And
Wow.
so it makes you feel quite tired. Your inner ears, a lot of the mechanisms in our inner ears for balance and spatial orientation really are gravity dependent mechanisms. So for some people, when they come up to the space station or to space at all, in the first few days, they actually your neurovestibular system is really undergoing like quite a bit of chaos. And so some people have what's called space motion sickness. They experience some nausea, maybe even some vomiting. I'm pretty lucky I didn't have any of that. I felt really at home and comfortable when I first arrived. Coming down, you just feel really tired because you're dealing with this weight of gravity. And it's really interesting from the exercise perspective because having lifted so much weight up here, I come back and I'm actually, I'm definitely getting stronger up here from lifting every day. And so I'll be able to still lift that much weight. The one thing that really changes is your cardiovascular system. And that makes sense because, even just pumping your blood, you're not working against gravity most of the time. So I'll be up here and I'll run, 5 miles easily on the treadmill and, no sweat. I'll go down when I land, I won't be able to run a mile. It's really interesting. Like, it takes a while to
Whoa.
get that back. Yeah,
So
you're
you
huffing and puffing and your body just can't do it.
so you're able to maintain the strength gains pretty well, which is amazing. Talk about like space gains. It's so dope. But then you land and you're needing to ramp up. Wow. So your cardiovascular system is just
Yeah. It's playing catch up
that's
for a while,
something.
and then you get
Yeah,
back,
yeah. Like,
but
yeah, yeah, of
it
course.
takes a while, and it's really interesting. The other really interesting thing I remember the first time I tried to run, you come back in the first few days, you're a little bit like a drunken sailor again from like the first few hours, really, a little bit like a drunken sailor because it's just that neurovestibular system. And then, pretty quickly you feel kind of normal. Like I felt fine. But then I remember being in the gym and I was walking fine already, and then they're like, okay, like go ahead and run. And so I took that first stride up and that felt normal. But then when I came down, I felt like an elephant crashing to the ground because I just wasn't used to that loading. And it was really, I think my body had adapted to the way I run on the treadmill. And on the treadmill, we usually only load ourselves about 75%, because we're wearing a harness over here. So the treadmill's right over here. And
Yep.
we clip ourselves in with this harness because you of course have to keep yourself down. So you run quite a bit differently up here. You have a much wider gait because I love it. I feel like a gazelle. So I think I now have this new kind of not motor neuron connection that I've associated with running. And I come down and I felt like 100 elephants crashing down. So it's a pretty interesting feeling. But then, you readapt, the body readapts pretty quickly. It's pretty phenomenal to experience.
All right. So, final two questions. So you're a mom and you have a 3-year-old, and I find that so enchanting. I also have a 3-year-old. What is your perspective coming back on this mission or returning back to space as a mom?
Yeah, it was very interesting actually. On my first mission 6 years ago, it was before her, of course, and even before I'd met my husband. So I was in a much different place in my life. And I can say at the end of that 7 months, I did not want to come home. I was having such an incredible time up here. It was my dream come true and everything was still so amazing. I had no desire to come home at all. It also I came home in April of 2020, so that was like I launched in September of 2019. There was no COVID. Saw COVID unfold from the space station and landed on a totally different planet in April of 2020. So that's a whole totally different story. But this time, in coming back to space, I didn't know, I knew how happy I was. I was happier than I've ever been in my life consistently. Like normal humans, I can be up and down on Earth, but up here, I'm pretty much just like up most of the time. But I didn't know, that was my first time as well. And I thought, well, it's the space station. will be the same, but like it's not new this time. It's not going to be novel. So will it feel the same this time? And will it feel justifiable for leaving her? I was really struggling with leaving her in the weeks leading up to our launch because I was just, struggling with that, with her being so young and thinking, is this going to be worth it this time? And so I was very, very thankful to realize that as soon as I got to space and I was weightless again, I had that same kind of instant pure joy and bliss. And I've been had that same level of happiness again, and that sense of the time spent up here being worthwhile for everything that we're doing. And the good thing is that at that age, I didn't know that if she would be very engaged in video chats like this because how they are. She's only 3.5. So I wasn't sure it would work. Luckily, she has been really engaged. And so I'll read books to her up here. I did a little Lego project, and if she's going to build the same one down there, I try to find some different ways to connect. But she really it seems like she really gets it, which is hard to believe because she'll fly around with me to the space station. She'll name all the modules. She knows her way around. She'll say, Mama, take me to the cupola. Show me Earth. Show me the other window. And she says these things, that I feel like, wow, she really gets it and comprehends what's happening much more than I thought. But then every once in a while, like, okay, she's 3. My husband and my husband are in California right now, and they were getting ready to leave. And my sister-in-law, his sister was going as well. And my daughter looked at her and said, oh, is Mama coming to California with us? So she didn't quite get that yeah. But I can't imagine that it would have played out so wonderfully that she has this connection. She feels like it's part of it. And so I just hope for, looking back on it, she's 3, so she probably won't even remember this period, but she'll remember the stories. And hopefully it's really just an adventure that we can all share and look back on together.
I have no doubt she's going to carry these stories forever because I have just met you and I will always talk about my friend, the astronaut, Commander Jessica Meir, which is so cool. So, what you mentioned that your baseline level of happiness is you detect that to be higher when you're in space. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's different for different people, and something about it for me, and I've known other people that feel this way too. Like we just feel at home right when we get here. I think part of the happiness is just that being in microgravity when you can just do this, or you can just, shoot yourself down the module. It just brings out this sense of playfulness and this levity that I
Yeah.
think that a lot of adults lose, unfortunately. And so maybe that's part of it. I'm just, the gravity of what we're experiencing, looking out the window and seeing Earth, like all of these things are just so spectacular that maybe, and it's so different from everything we've experienced in our lives that maybe that has something to do with it. This time I am very much looking forward to seeing my daughter again. I definitely don't have the same, I definitely don't want to ever leave, because I have that extra draw back to the planet. But yeah, I've been thinking about, or it's been more than just over 5 months now, and so I really am starting to have a little bit of an ache, just to squeeze her
Mhm.
little body. And of course, she's changed
Totally.
so much in just these months since I've been gone.
Oh my god, it's so beautiful. And you really are, I mean, observing you, I'm filled with a sense of awe. And that is something that we take for granted, I think, in our day to day. And I have challenged myself this summer with finding moments of awe, whether it's with my kids or marveling at my ability to do a particular physical feat or mental challenge. And so it sounds like your work is just infused with that awe. And I love observing it. Thank you for sharing it with us. We have one final question for you at Project Swagger. I am in favor of geeking out, of reveling in curiosity, and I love nerdy enthusiasm. So, what is your pitch for finding that enthusiasm in our lives?
I think one of the things that we that are up here in the space are so fortunate to have is the perspective that it gives. And so that's kind of the lesson that I want, you can't look out the window and look down at Earth and not feel the magnitude of that. See the atmosphere and understand how precious it is, how fragile it is. See how tiny and insignificant our planet is in the perspective of the solar system and the universe. And it's easy to have that perspective when you're looking down on the planet. It's not easy in your everyday life. We're all human. All of us can easily get caught up in things that are really insignificant, that really don't matter. And they can, just take over your mind. And being able to take that step back and take that perspective, that's the thing that I wish every eye of every human could come up here to space and see what I've seen, because I think it helps you. It helps you get that kind of perspective that you need to remember to, sometimes it's just not worth it. It's not worth the energy and the effort to get so wrapped up about something that's really small and doesn't matter. Just try to regain and retain that healthy perspective. And that's something that I hope by sharing this experience that we're so fortunate to have up here, we can kind of help instill in people all over the world.
My gosh, thank you for that perspective. And I received that. And hopefully the Project Swagger community will receive it. And deeply, deeply grateful for the work that you're doing, the work that you're sharing, continuing to make science cool. You are like a personal rock star to me. So thank you, Jessica, for sharing and taking time out of your really, really varied day on the ISS to share a little bit of it.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. This has really been a pleasure. I mean, ever since I did your class, you were already my favorite instructor, and then I was doing a class at home, and all of a sudden you start talking about, I love astronauts, I love space, and all that. You kept saying it, and I was like, okay, this is it. We got to make this happen. And then there was another class that I did, and you said it again. I was like, okay, yeah, it's all over. We got to do this.
Woo! I'm going to be thinking about that combo forever. And by the way, Jessica joined me for a Peloton ride, and you'll have the opportunity to take it soon. Stay tuned for that. The Peloton ride with Jessica will be available on the Peloton platform, of course, and on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in to Project Swagger. I will see you next time.